Hello, in this video I'll be sharing with you how to cut a beginner friendly corset with yoke. So if this is something you like, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. Let's dive right into today's video. So here is my pattern, and I've gone ahead to mark out the basic measurement, which includes the shoulder to bust, shoulder to underbust, to the waistline, and 5 inches for my top length. Now I'm going to mark the shoulder divided by 2, and I'll be adding ½ inch, and I'll come down by 1. So because we're actually adding a sleeve to this dress, that's why we're adding ½ inch to it. So I'll go ahead and connect to the shoulder point. To find my chest line, I'm going to go ahead to mark my bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So what I have there is about 7 inches, and I'll go ahead to draw a straight line at that point. So after that, I'll be drawing out my chest line. I'll just place my ruler and draw out, or you can just go ahead to measure what you have from the chest line to the bust line and mark. Now I'll divide the armhole into 2 this way, and I will come in by ½ inch. After marking that ½ inch, I will go down to my chest line, mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'm going to place my curved rule, and I'll connect all the way to the upper part of my pattern. Now I'll go ahead to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple divided by 2 is 3.5. My nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5. I'll mark it all the way down to the pattern, and I'll go ahead to draw a straight line connecting. So after I'm done marking this, the next step is just to go ahead to mark the basic neckline of 3 by 3 inches. That is what I'll be using for this pattern. So after I'm done marking this, you want to go ahead and outline it to make it more visible for you to see. So the next step from here is just to go ahead to mark my dart intake. So for this pattern, I'll be using a straight dart because it's a beginner friendly corset, and I'll be using 1 inch on both sides of this pattern. Now you can use 1.5 inches if you're a plus size, and I'll go ahead to use my ruler to draw a straight line connecting to this pattern from the under bust down to the lower part of my pattern. I'm going to place this curved rule touching my bust down to the under bust, and I'll repeat the same pattern at the other side of my dress or pattern, sorry. So after I'm done doing this, I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker to outline this to make it more visible for you to see. So next, I'm going to go ahead to divide my shoulder into 2, the remaining part of my shoulder into 2 mark, and I'm going to connect from there down to my bust or chest line. So this is what I have after I'm done connecting. This will serve as a guide when you're cutting out or marking out your dart intake. So for my chest line, I'm going to go ahead to measure 1.5 inches, or you can mark your bust radius round. So to get your bust radius is the distance from your bust to your under bust. Measure what you have from your bust to your under bust. Mine is 3 inches, and I'll go ahead to mark my 3 inches all the way around my pattern this way, and you'll be forming a circle around your pattern. Now if you measure what you have there, you can have about 2 inches or 1.5 inches. It totally depends on your bust radius, and I'll be using that bust radius to cut out this pattern. So now I'll make a mark at that point I have at the upper part of the bust radius, and I'll draw a very faint line which will serve as a guide. Now I'll be marking 1 inch on both sides and 1 inch on the other side, and next I'll just go ahead to place my curved rule, connect from the bust down to the under bust, and I will be repeating the same process on the other part of my pattern this way. So after I'm done drawing out, this is what I have. If you're a plus size, go ahead to use 1.5 inches, or if your bust is bigger, you can go ahead to use a dart intake of 1.5 on one side, and you'll be using 2 inches or 2.5 inches. It totally depends on how big your bust is. From my chest line, I went down by ½ inch and I came in by ½ inch. So from that point, I'm going to connect this all the way down to my under bust. So you can place your tape and you mark your bust gauging, which is about 1.2 inches or 1.25 inches from your under bust, and I'm just going to connect this helps your cup to sit very well from your chest line to your bust or under bust line. So after I'm done marking this, you can decide to use your curved rule or French curve to draw out your neckline, or you can just go ahead to connect it all the way up. So this is the neck line or cup styling that I want. This totally depends on the design you're working on, but this pattern is just basic and we're just making use of a normal neckline or a sweetheart neckline for this. Now I'll be coming down by ½ inch from my armhole. So if you want your chest line to be a bit free or your armhole to be a bit free, come down by ½ inch. If not, you can just leave it that way and connect your pattern all the way down there. Most times when I'm marking out my corset pattern, I normally leave it at that point, but for this pattern you can just go down by ½ inch. So now you're going to divide what you have between your armhole and your bust circumference into two, and you're going to mark. From there, you're going to connect your cup all the way down to that part, and from there, you're also going to draw your cup down to your under bust. So I'll go ahead and take this down to my chest line. So after I'm done doing that, I'm just going to take my curved rule and I'm going to go ahead to connect it down to the under bust part of my pattern this way. So this is what I have, and I'll just go ahead to label my cup and the yoke part of my pattern. So you can go ahead to tighten your yoke, the yoke part of this dress, but for a beginner this will be easier and better to just work with your yoke this way. The only difference you're going to have is after joining your cup, the armhole a bit will just extend down to the other part of your corset, but that is not a problem. So next, I'm going to go ahead to mark the body circumference. At the bust, mark your bust circumference divided by 4. Measure the dart intake you have here, and you're going to replace it and add your sewing allowance. At the under bust, you're going to mark your under bust circumference divided by 4. Measure the dart intake, replace and add your sewing allowance. At the waistline, you're going to mark the waist circumference divided by 4. Measure the dart intake and replace, add your sewing allowance. So if you want to snatch your waistline, you can do that, but this is just a basic corset pattern for a beginner. So at the lower part, go ahead and mark your hip circumference divided by 4. Measure the dart intake, replace that and add your sewing allowance to this pattern. So after you're done doing that, go ahead to place your curved rule connecting from the bust down to the under bust to the waist and down to the hip point or top length of your blouse. So this is what I have after I'm done marking out. So by the time you blend in your dart, you notice that your hip is not so far away from your pattern, especially for those that have bigger hips. I'm just going to go ahead to connect this all the way to the lower part, and the next step I'm going to take from here is just to go up by 2 inches, and I will be connecting it down to my blouse. This is just to give this a stylish effect at the lower part of my blouse. So after this, I'm just going to go ahead to cut out my pattern, and I will also label it. So at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, and if you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and if you have any question, please leave it at the comment section. And after I'm done cutting out my pattern, this is what I have. Next, we'll be moving over to the back pattern, and I've gone ahead to mark out the basic measurement just like we did in front, but the neckline is about 3 by 1.5 inches. So after that, I'll just go ahead to mark my nipple to nipple just like we did for the front also. That is my nipple to nipple divided by 2, which is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5, and I'm going to go ahead to place my ruler, and I'm going to draw a straight line connecting from the chest line down to the top length. So I'll go ahead and use my marker to mark this out. So after I'm done doing that, I will be marking a dart intake of 1/2 inch on both sides of my waistline because this is the back pattern. Now I'm just going to extend this all the way up, or you can come down by 1 inch from your bust line. But if you're going to cut out the back pattern, just go ahead and extend it all the way up, and then I'll extend my dart to the lower part. Go ahead to mark this out so that it's going to be very visible for you to see, and also repeat this at the other side of my pattern this way. So after I'm done doing that, the next step is just to go ahead and insert my body measurement, which I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4, add my sewing allowance, mark my waist circumference divided by 4, and I'll go ahead to measure the dart intake, replace, and add my sewing allowance. At the top length or blouse length, go ahead to mark your hip circumference divided by 4 and add your sewing allowance. Now you want to connect your pattern starting from the chest line down to the under bust if you marked that, but for the pattern at the back we just marked our waistline, and then I'm going to connect to the hip point. I'm just going to go ahead to use my marker to mark this out so that it's going to be very visible for me to see. So now I'm just going to go ahead to come down by 1/2 inch from my chest line, and I'll connect all the way up. After I'm done connecting this, remember we went down by 1/2 inch from our chest line, and I'll go ahead to connect this, and go ahead also to connect this at the lower part of my pattern this way. Now you'll be marking 1.5 inches from the beginning part of your pattern. So this is not a standard, you can use 2 inches or 2.5 inches. It totally depends on what you want to use. So after this, I'm just going to rule a straight line and connect, and I'll use my marker to mark it out to indicate my lacing bar area, and I'll also make a dot at that point. So at the lower part of my pattern, just like I came up by 2 inches, for this part I'll be coming up also by 2 inches. I'll mark and I'll extend it all the way to the back pattern. So I'll just go ahead to use that 2 inches mark all the way to the back part of my pattern this way. And after I'm done doing that, we're going to go ahead to work on the upper part of the pattern, which is the neckline. I'll come down by 1 inch and I'll connect it to the that, which is my nipple to nipple divided by 2. So here I'll mark out 0.25 inches or 0.3 inches, which you take out the gaping at the back of my pattern. Go ahead to label this out, and after this I'm just going to go ahead to cut out my back pattern. So after cutting this, we have come to the end of this tutorial. If you find this video very interesting and educative, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and if you have any question, please leave it at the comment section.